Welcome back to another wonderful episode of Success Innovation. This episode is called Makers During COVID-19. Makers During COVID-19 is an episode where I get to talk to and have a wonderful conversation with a young individual, Karina Popovich, who is going to Cornell, and she tells us about how early entrepreneurship hit her life. Thank you. Let's get started. Welcome to another wonderful episode of Success Innovation. Thank you so much to the loyal audience, to the listeners, to the viewers for joining us to yet discover and to listen to another wonderful individual. Today I have the pleasure of having Karina Popovich. She is a freshman. She is finishing up her first year at Cornell University. She is working towards majoring in applied economics and management at the Charles H. Dyson School of Business. She is the founder of Makers for COVID-19 and Wear Alpha. She enjoys prototyping with laser cutters and 3D printers. She is using her skills to raise awareness of STEM with the public. She seeks to make prototyping education and 3D printing more accessible to today's youth. Welcome, Karina Popovich, to Success Innovation. How are you this evening?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I am super excited to share more about my story and tell you all about everything that's going on with Makers for COVID-19 and Wear Alpha.
Right, fantastic. Yes, and that's exactly why we brought you into the show today. But first off, I'm going to get you a little, background story of who you are, where you were born, and how did you start getting into this STEM field?
Yeah, for sure. So I am from Brooklyn, New York, and my parents immigrated from Ukraine here a few months right before I was born. And my dad took up a job of being an electrician to just pay the bills and has been doing that ever since. And I joke around that as a kid, I grew up playing with screwdrivers and, engineering was kind of in my blood, thanks to my dad. So I've been doing engineering always since I was a kid. I can remember, being in the elementary school science fair and presenting a project on lighting up a light bulb, or in middle school programming robots. And to me, I just really fell in love with the idea of being able to learn how the world around me works and how I can make things, physically be able to create something and then see something be made from start to finish. And I think that's one of the reasons why I also fell in love with 3D printing, because it really let me do that. It really let me see something really be created out of nothing and really embody the whole idea and philosophy of engineering to create something. And I think from that point on, I really just fell in love with this power of engineering. And, to me, engineering was more than just being able to create something. In my case, being a first generation daughter of immigrants, it was a way to move up the socioeconomic ladder and, to achieve financial stability for myself and my family. And I realized that this is something that could be the case for so many other people, so many other minorities or people of color or women that don't necessarily have access to STEM and science and technology, engineering and math, which is what STEM stands for, which is why I made it a personal mission of mine to really share my love for 3D printing and to inspire other young girls and other people to pursue STEM and to really explore it further.
So you're finishing your first year in Cornell. So you're about 19, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah.
Okay. How do you, as a young lady, how do you jump in and get a 3D printing and start, promoting and advocating for STEM at such a young age?
Yeah, I definitely have to say I was very lucky. I went to a technical high school, literally called Brooklyn Technical High School, and it happened to be one of the top schools here in my city. And every freshman in my high school is mandated to take digital design class, which is where we learn how to 3D model. And I happened to have a Black female teacher who was super encouraging and super just empowering to be around and see everything that she's accomplished and how capable she was of really leading us as students and leading the rest of the school and just being a great role model. So she really set me on the point on the path to engineering. And then from that point forward, I've been doing programs like Girls Who Code, being active in the engineering community in New York City, whether that be attending events, networking events, hackathons, or whatever it may be, and just really learning as much as I could, taking on internships and prototyping and building and just growing my knowledge in the whole STEM world.
So what would you say the biggest or the fondest memory of that high school experience would be for you at this point, looking back?
I think my most fondest experience would definitely have to be seeing a 3D printer for the first time. That's definitely when I saw my first ever 3D printer. And mind you, back when I was in middle school and in elementary school, when I first heard of 3D printers, I thought that, I can't wait to live in a future where I would run out of spoons, and the first thing that would come to mind is I go and 3D print a spoon.
Right.
Like that's what I believed to be the power of 3D printing, and I still believe that to be the power of 3D printing. I can't wait for a future where that's actually possible and is actually, and I truly believe it's going to happen. So seeing a 3D printer and realizing, wow, like I get to see this technology in person, I get to experience it. It just felt like a really beautiful moment where I could really kind of feel one step closer to my dreams.
Right. At what point did you actually feel and did you realize, oh wow, I'm truly an advocate and a channel individual for promoting STEM, science, technology, and engineering to other individuals, other young individuals? How did that happen? How did you realize it?
Yeah, I think it's funny that you bring that up, because with something like that, it's always, for me, I always kind of thought of myself as, someone who really isn't an activist, who really isn't, teaching or advocating, I always just thought of myself as someone who was just really sharing her love for 3D printing and STEM. And I never really thought of it as, I'm going out and advocating for something, or I'm going out and, teaching something. To me, it always felt like I was just sharing my love and sharing my passion. But the moment that I really realized that I was, I guess, advocating for something had to be when I was organizing, when I was running my second year of teaching elementary school program, of teaching in elementary school, of robotics and coaching the robotics team. And that's when I really realized that, I was actually a role model to these kids, and I was someone that they looked up to and someone who really started their journey in STEM, and that they can later on, when they grow up, say, oh, it was my teacher, Miss Karina, that then, led me to pursue STEM and led me to become an engineer. And I think that's when I really realized. But, to this day, I still don't think of myself as an advocate or any of these kind of, labels or anything. I always just tend to think of myself as just someone who really loves to do STEM and to just share it with the rest of the world.
Right. Yeah, you're just passionate about it, doing what you really enjoy, and if other people see you as an activist and advocating for it, then the more power to it, because it is what you enjoy actually. So great.
Yeah.
So I said that you're pursuing applied economics and management, yet you're really involved in STEM, and you mentioned engineering. So can you kind of explain why you're pursuing applied economics and management versus engineering and engineering field? Let's just clarify that for me and for the audience.
Of course. I think for me, one thing that I realized in late high school, so the way that my high school was structured is for 2 years, we just take regular high school classes. And for the remainder of our last 2 years, we actually pursue a major. And I was in the mechanical engineering major. And very quickly, I realized that, I wanted to build and prototype and do things, but I wanted to do them on my own terms. I don't want to have a manager or a boss hovering over my head telling me, you need to build this, you need to do that. I realized that for me, what was important was being able to apply my technical experience to create something. And one of the things that I personally saw myself wanting to create is a business or a social entrepreneurship venture, something that could really apply technology to benefit the world and solve a bigger problem. And that's when I realized that I need to be pursuing entrepreneurship or particularly management. And that's how I ended up going into Dyson's or Cornell's business school to really just further study business. And now with my background in engineering, I could really, apply my engineering background to whatever it is that I want to create or build. And just apply my engineering background and continue making and make even on a grander scale of not just seeing a product come to life, but seeing the bigger picture come to life.
Okay, so now that you're gone through your essentially first year, freshman year at Cornell, pursuing this applied economics and management degree, and exactly applying and following your plan of becoming your own business model creator, has that actually helped you shape the business that you're doing about makers for COVID-19? Did that actually have a lot to do with it? Or did you just kind of start tinkering with, let's see if I can create a mask for the frontline healthcare providers? How did that come about?
Yeah.
And just kind of walk us through that.
Yeah, well, I definitely have to say I've always been a very ambitious person from the start. I mean, even as early as my sophomore year of high school, I was starting a nonprofit, trying to build something, trying to do something. So for me, when COVID-19 came around, and I previously had started Wear Alpha, where we were 3D printing, where I was 3D printing clothing, and I was also traveling at the same time, teaching people how to 3D print. So with COVID-19 rolling around, I was no longer traveling, or Alpha kind of slowed down a little bit. So I had a lot of free time on my hands. I had lots of 3D printers that weren't really active. And I also heard a lot of buzz going around in the whole 3D printing PPE world. And, I was very curious and initially intimidated by the whole idea of, 3D printing PPE, because who who would take PPE from just your regular person with a 3D printer? It almost seems like out of this world, like nobody would do that. So I was obviously intimidated from the start, but I realized very quickly that and this is where my entrepreneurship mindset came in, that with 3D printing PPE, especially as early as March 30th, which is when it really kind of was starting up. There are so many things that a lot of people didn't know. There were so many people that wanted to get started but couldn't get started. There was so much information. There's information overload on how to get started, where to get started. And this was a huge problem that needed to be solved. And that's where I figured, me being an entrepreneur and being able to come in and solve this problem and creating a platform or a community where people can share ideas, share techniques, where people like me and organizers could create guides and create tools to help these people with their problems, was exactly what we could do, and exactly what people would need to help them get started and help them 3D print PPE. And that's exactly what we did, and is what helped us take off and get so many people on board initially.
So once you started, believing in yourself and started diving into this, how did you get funding for this project, for this? Did you divert some of the nonprofit organization funding that you already had to this effort? Or how did you manage that?
Yeah, so funding actually came completely from our GoFundMe. In terms of, initially funding myself, that was just something that, I was kind of hoping that, I would pay out of pocket for now and get reimbursed later with the funds that we had raised on our GoFundMe. And, to this day, we've raised over $7,500, which is enough for all of our makers and for all of us to just continue printing, and enough to reimburse all of us. And, luckily for all the makers that were involved in this, they're completely kind-hearted and willing to do good. And so many of them didn't even want to take the reimbursement, or didn't even want to get reimbursed at firsthand. So we've been able to really just run based off our GoFundMe funding. And thanks to the awesome makers that really just want to help the world and want to really show the rest of the world the power of 3D printing.
Fantastic. And let's go back to the word alpha. At what age did you actually start that?
Yeah, so I started Wear Alpha when I was 18, but I was thinking about it way earlier. So it's definitely been something in the works, and something that I've been planning to build for a while.
So you mentioned that you were thinking about it for a while and you didn't really
Yeah.
get the courage to actually jump into it. How, and for the audience, success is not just an overnight process. It takes planning, it takes preparation, it takes determination, it takes a whole bunch of steps behind the scenes before you actually succeed
Yeah.
at. So can you kind of walk us through whether you had a business plan, whether you actually had some mentors behind you advising as to what to properly do, and how did you actually structure it before you actually went into production mode for War Alpha?
Yeah, I think for me, I mean, I've always believed in the power of mentors and role models, and having people to really back me up and guide me. But I think the biggest problem that, all of my mentors and I agreed on was really myself. I was my own biggest problem at the time, or my worst enemy at the time, because I was really kind of worried to invest into myself. And, back then I was, just thinking, just in the process of high school, and I wasn't really able to fully invest myself into my own ideas. I wasn't so confident in my ideas to the point where I was able to say, hey, I can jump full force into my idea and just let it happen and watch it grow and see what happens with it. I wasn't really ready to commit myself to it that much yet, because I didn't believe in the idea and I didn't believe in myself. And I think that for me was my biggest setback. And it wasn't until high school ended and I met one of my, I guess you can call him my greatest mentors, that he really coached me through it and really showed me that, there's no reason for me not to believe in myself. And of all times to believe in myself, it's definitely college, because what better time to fail than college? Um, you know, Other times in life, you're going to have bigger commitments. You're going to have to pay rent. But in college, you're kind of set. You kind of have, if not your parents paying for you, you have some other way to figure out college. So the best time really to take a risk is in college. And it's that moment that I realized that, and I was able to take on bigger challenges, and I was able to commit myself to other projects, that I then realized that, hey, I could totally commit myself to launching my own business, not only just committing my time to it, but also committing my money to it. Because I think the biggest test to believing in yourself is when you're able to put your money down and put your money where your mouth is. It was that moment for me when I was like, you know what? Yeah, I am very serious about this, and I believe in myself, and I can put this, and I can get this going.
From conception of the idea of War Alpha to actual present day War Alpha, how
Yeah.
has that stayed true to the mission and the vision, or how much has it actually morphed from what you actually conceptualized? Can you kind of go over that?
Yeah, I know Alpha definitely has gone through so many changes. When we first started, we were just a company that created clothing to empower more women to pursue STEM. And it was a very broad mission, and definitely not something that we were able to succeed at and were able to do well. Mostly because it was my mistake of not really listening to our audience and not really doing our market research to the best possible extent that we could. And it was that made me realize that, hey, I need to step back from this version of alpha and to really realize what I want alpha to be. Because to me, so much of what today's where alpha is about, a kind of projection of my morals and my values, of inspiring youth to pursue STEM, of really creating an accepting community, not just for women, but for everyone, to really talk about STEM and what it means to pursue a happy and fulfilling career in STEM. And I think I wanted to really see all of my values and all of my all the things I really cared about transform into alpha. And that's when I really had to rework everything that was going on and really redo our clothing line completely so that it would reflect these ideas and this new wear alpha that I've created or modified.
So it seems that one of your biggest obstacles, and this is what I am getting, that the marketing portion and the study of your audience or your target audience was at some point, it was your biggest obstacle. How did you actually manage to determine that? And did you have a team that actually pulled together and said, hey, this is what we have to focus? Because you as the CEO founder where you have a vision and a mission and you're trying to say, okay, let's make it work, let's make it work, but you're kind of tunnel visioning yourself and you're closing yourself off to other opinions. So how did you actually realize that?
Yeah, I think it's exactly what you just said. I mean, when alpha first launched, I was really completely tunnel vision. I was focused on my idea and making my idea work. I wasn't really willing to listen to the opinions that some of my really good friends were sharing with me, because I wasn't ready to hear them, and I wasn't ready to hear that what I created and what I invested all of my energy into creating was something that didn't really take into consideration what our audience wanted or what the public really wanted. And I think that was my biggest flaw and my biggest mistake, just not being able to listen and not being able to really just understand and take people's critiques and really just take it for what it is. And maybe not necessarily take it close to heart, but inspect it and see if it holds any ground, if it holds any truth. And that was my biggest error. And I think that's the way that I really kind of pulled myself back out of that is, I realized that I was tunnel visioning, and I realized that the comments and the opinions that my friends were making actually had value to them. And as much as I didn't want to admit it, I had to take a step back and say, hey, this is just not working out. I'm having doubt in myself and what I'm working on, because I realized that my friends' comments have truth to them. And I also am having doubts in what I'm creating. And I don't want to be creating something that I'm doubtful. I don't want to be, selling a product that I'm not happy with, which is why I had to take a moment and say, hey, I need to really stop, rethink this all, and just redo it and rework it.
What is the biggest surprise that you've gotten from this experience of, founding Wear Alpha, as well as diving and diverting into the COVID-19 makers? What has been the biggest surprise so far off of that process?
Yeah, I think the biggest surprise for me has definitely had to do with just seeing how willing people are to work together. And in my mind, I grew up in a I guess you can say culture where students didn't want to work together because they were always trying to climb up the food chain of who could get to the highest school, who could get to whatever. And I always thought that I would face a similar issue here, where people would want to climb up the ladder and not necessarily work together. But I found the very opposite, where people are so open to working together, where we've been able to gather over 300 makers to literally just work together and build PPE. And I think it's something that I've been really surprised about, just seeing how willing people are to really help and work together and just be so kind of bound together by a cause. I've never really seen this before, at least, being orchestrated or run by myself. So it's definitely something really honorable and commendable. And I'm just really honored to be part of it all.
Fantastic. Do you have a team lead, or are you the one that's also organizing and orchestrating the whole
Yeah.
array of team members or makers, as you call them?
Yeah, I'm the one that is the founder and CEO of Makers for COVID-19 and really just managing everything. So I get to be both on the ground and off the ground. So it's lots of fun because, you could see my printer back there. It's currently 3D printing PPE. So doing a bit of everything, and it's just tons of fun, but also really busy.
And you mentioned you have about 300 individuals, 300 makers that are collaborating with you. And I want you to tell us whether they're local around your area or if they're nationwide at this moment.
Yeah, so we have makers all across the country. We even have makers around the world. We're in several different countries with new chapters that we recently opened up in Mexico and Ghana. So we're going to be working to fight COVID-19 on their front lines as well. And we are super eager to get started there because one thing that's for sure is if COVID-19 hasn't already been devastating there, it's soon to come. And we definitely want to be ready and prepared to make sure that we can handle it and really help them and their medical workers handle everything they need with the PPE to stay protected.
Right. The designs that you're actually sharing with those makers, is that something that is proprietary to you, or is that free shareware essentially that you borrow from somebody else to actually print the design?
Yeah,
How does
so
that work?
everything is completely shared and open source and available to everyone. We definitely a lot of the whole 3D printing PPE movement shares a lot of the same files. So we definitely benefit from that. I also know that a lot of our makers and we ourselves as a community have created our own resources and created our own files, which again are open source, and we're definitely all about sharing it with the community because at the end of the day, this all relates back to our mission of getting as many people to 3D print PPE as possible. So for us, making this open source was a really big priority, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
Fantastic. Thank you. That's incredible. Thank you. I can commend you and acknowledge you for having it that way. That's a really good model to follow, to be collaborating with the whole world,
Yeah.
essentially. Yes, fantastic. So you're in this path of essentially pursuing advanced economics and management, but you're also an engineer and you're involved in STEM. So what are the next steps for Karina Popovich, CEO, founder? Are you thinking of continuing focusing on the management and economics business side, or are you also intertwining with getting an engineering degree at some point?
Yeah, I think I'm definitely not going to be getting an engineering degree.
Okay.
I think at this point, one thing that I'm definitely going to be doing is really just pursuing my passions further and exploring all of my interests. I definitely can say for a fact that medicine is not one of my interests, but one of my interests is definitely problem solving, which is how I ended up, figuring out COVID-19 and, getting a group of makers to work together to solve this problem. And, now Makers for COVID-19 isn't just about 3D printing PPE. We're also connecting medical workers with suppliers of medical gowns and all these other nuances. And, I'm also working with a bunch of engineers and medics and medical professionals to create reusable PPE and really just focus on all these issues. So I think for me, this all goes to say that my biggest interest is problem solving. And I think the beauty in that is that it can take me in any which direction, because, I have the power of engineering and the power of business in my tool belt and management. So I can really apply that to so many different fields. So I'm just eager to see where it takes me. But for now, I'm just eager to teach more people about 3D printing. And, now with this whole world of PPE and 3D printing PPE, a lot of people have seen the power of 3D printing. So really just at this point, moving the 3D printing movement further and teaching more people and sharing my love further and working on more alpha, I think are going to be my next future steps.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Yes, definitely. I do want to ask you a question regarding education and going to college and whatnot. I've heard a lot of pros and cons from other individuals saying, college is not necessarily the way to go. Some people say, yes, college is the way to go for certain degrees, et cetera, because college and education has become so expensive. But you're a young lady, you're an entrepreneur, you've started to go to college and you're pursuing an education that way. What would you say from your experience at this point, at this very point,
Yeah.
reflecting back at your high school self and now reflecting at your first year done at Cornell? Does it add value? Is it something that you would advocate for others to pursue? What's your comment on that?
Yeah. I think that my opinion definitely has to be taken with a grain of salt since I'm only a freshman in college. But I do have to say I have a really strong opinion on education. And like many other entrepreneurs, I think it's very clear that our education system doesn't really encourage entrepreneurial thinking, doesn't really encourage creativity or problem solving or leadership. And, you know, I I can't I can't say that I would have ever learned the skills that I have through Makers for COVID-19 at school, and I can definitely say for sure that the skills that I'm learning here are definitely more applicable and valuable, at least to me, than calculus or something like that. Not saying that calculus isn't, but for the field that I'm going into, which is a very abstract field. And aside from the engineering bit of things, I definitely think that, this college is definitely not one of those things that has benefited me the most. Although I do have to say, having that strong network, of Cornell students, of Cornell alumni, of even having that Cornell brand name attached to me, has been a huge help and has been able to get me farther along in whatever it is that I'm doing. And I think that definitely deserves its credit. So I definitely have to say there's a lot of things that come into play when it comes to education, but definitely it's not something that should be discredited. There's a lot of value, whether it be even in taking classes and really training your brain, because that's something that my parents always equated classes or learning to. It's not necessarily what you get out of the class. It's just the fact that class is training your mind to think in a certain way. There's always something you can get out of it. But my personal opinion is it's great, but definitely not for entrepreneurs.
Right. I think most of the classes are there to set a foundation and to get you trained to a certain level. And then, yes, of course, you as an individual taking those courses have to get out of that classroom, the four walls, and go ahead and implement those and go ahead and have those learned basic skills applied to a certain subject or a certain application that you really want to, whether it be joining a club robotics team, solving a real problem, or as you're doing, venture into an entrepreneurship adventure as you're doing. So that's something that I can say, yes.
Yeah, I think that's part of the issue, though, that too many students and too much of our society makes grades the end all be all, to the point where students derive their value solely from grades rather than from them applying the grades to creating something or pursuing something further. And I think that's the bigger issue that we're having. And I think that's definitely something that does more harm than it does good. Because then you see kids come out of the schooling system not knowing what their passion is, or not knowing what to do in life because their whole life was centered around grades, that, in the real world, other than that, GPA number, don't have any other meaning. Now they're kind of just stuck. And I think, reframing the way we think is definitely going to be crucial to really making schooling something that is a lot more useful and is a lot more beneficial to an entrepreneur, or even to just creating that entrepreneurial mindset.
Yes, fair enough. And I think a lot of it has to do with the institutions, not just the educational institutions having that set forth, but also the industry and the job market, essentially, where wherever you go to a career fair, the only thing, or one of the biggest things that they look at, is your GPA. So that makes a big impact on students wanting to have a better GPA than your
Yeah.
next neighbor, because essentially you want a job and a position to be able to say I made it and I'm making X amount of dollars because my GPA reflects that I'm capable of doing this. So fantastic. Do you good leaders always create good leaders? Do you have any individuals you actually look up to? And if so, who are your mentors?
Yeah, I definitely have to say that my mentors have changed over time. One thing that I really believe in is um, using mentors as goals, and really having mentors that you can see that I really like these particular qualities about this mentor, and this is what I want to gain from them being my mentor for a certain period of time. And the goal is really to like absorb that person's qualities and learn from that person, and really make sure that whoever that mentor is, they're at an attainable spot, so that you can, see yourself in them and see that you can very not too difficultly, but can become who they are, or at least acquire their skills. Because a lot of people have mentors and role models that are as big as Michelle Obama, or these crazy amazing leaders, which are awesome and perfect to have as mentors. But you also want to have some mentors that are more attainable, more achievable, more like you, and some that you can easily learn from. And in those cases, some of my mentors have been, say, my boss, for example, or even one of my teachers. And being able to have small mentors that aren't necessarily like these crazy big people, and being able to learn from them, is what will really bring you up that ladder, so that then you can work towards achieving something even greater.
Yes, fantastic, fantastic. That is awesome. That's a good way to put it. Mentors are not necessarily always somebody that's really unapproachable, but it could be your teacher, it could be your boss, as you mentioned, where you can actually go and ask them a question, say, hey, I want to bounce this idea off of you. What do you think? Get some feedback, and then you can say, oh, okay, I'm not so way off, and then go ahead and make adjustments and proceed on your path. There you go. Fantastic. What do you believe your superpower to be?
Yeah, I definitely have to say my superpower has to go back to making and 3D printing. I
Okay.
can say for a fact that, I, as soon as I have a vision in my head, I will definitely be able to make it. And there's no stopping me when it comes to making it. And, whether it be learning how to use this new machine or learning how to do something else, I will learn how to use that new machinery, or use that new technique to be able to make whatever it is that I've conjured up in my mind.
So you are truly a maker, and that is your superpower.
Oh
Fantastic.
yeah, I am a full-on maker, and love to make for my life.
Great, great, great. Do you have any particular books, movie, or podcast that you actually believe has made an impact in your life and you wish more people would take advantage of it? Do you mind sharing that with us?
That's a great question. I know, and this is definitely very unfortunate, but I haven't been able to read in a good amount of time, because of classes and everything being so rampant. And I hate myself for it, because I know I need to read and finally pick up a book and start reading. But to that note, one thing that I would like to just quickly talk about is just fantasy movies. And as off as this may sound, I know when I was a kid, I used to love watching fantasy movies, whether that be Marvel or, anything out there. I think there's something about fantasy movies that makes you believe that you could do anything you set your mind to. And it's this kind of inspiration that you really need to hold on to amidst all the rejection, amidst all the negativity, and just remember that, you are unique. And, you just need to find what it is that makes you unique and hold on to it and grow it and become even better at it. And also just remember to never give up and continue pursuing whatever your dream is, because eventually you will become your own superhero.
Right. And those movies and those fantasy movies or those fantasy books do bring out the child in you, the child that actually believes you could actually be whatever and do whatever. And when you're a kid, you feel like, oh, I could fly. If I jump off this building, I could definitely fly like Mary Poppins if you really want.
Yeah.
Take an umbrella up there and jump off the wall, and hopefully you fly or do something like that.
Exactly.
So, just keep that child of yours alive and let that individual lead your path to those crazy ideas, and then you can tweak them and modify them and make them work. Fantastic. You are a young individual. You are a 19-year-old young lady going to Cornell, finishing off your first year, freshman year, Cornell, and you've been very successful. You founded, COVID-19 makers. You've also have Wear Alpha in your pocket. But what is the definition of success at this point for Karina?
Yeah, I think for me, success has meant a bunch of different things throughout my life and journey. And I think a lot of people will find that for themselves. But at this moment in time, it's definitely been finding the right balance between going hard and also taking care of myself. Back when I was in high school, I was, constantly working, never thinking about, taking care of myself, taking care of my mental health, of, slowing down to really reflect or assess what I'm doing. And I realized how much value comes from that. And, back in high school when I would be working nonstop, pulling all-nighters, just working just to work and really being on the grind, I really did burn out, and I really did, face some of the repercussions of that. And I was able to work like a maniac, but, it's come to a point now where, I can't really do that anymore, and I don't want to do that anymore because I realized all the negative effects of that. And I realized that, I'd rather be consistent in my work and work, at 80% every single day of the week, rather than give 3 days of the week my 100% and then the other 4 be at 50 or 60. And I think that's something that I've personally realized to work better for me. There's definitely different things that work for different people, but at this point, finding the right balance has definitely been what I found to be my success.
Fantastic. So finding the right balance of, work and, recreational, family, or whatever you guys, the audience has going on, that is the key to success, at least for Karina at this point.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you. You do mention something really key, mental health. How do you deal and how do you cope at this point with the mental health?
Yeah. I think right now we're in a very difficult and weird time where mental health is definitely, put to the test. Like my bed is right there. This is my table where I work, and everything happens in one room. And this is all due to COVID-19, and it's definitely something that we will kind of have to continue living through as we persist in a state of quarantine. And I think it's definitely going to be something that's very difficult to really continue keeping up with, and readjusting our mental health to kind of adapt and being able to conform and work under these type of standards. But I think in my case, what has been able to help a lot is really just to go out and get some fresh air and just go on a nice walk with, my best friend or my sister or anyone else, and just really take some time to not think about work and to just take a breather and really enjoy life, and just take a step back from everything else that's going on. I think that's been super helpful for me, and also just being able to get onto a routine and telling myself that, hey, every morning I'm going to go out and go out on a nice walk before starting my day with some emails or whatever it is, and just taking it day by day. And also realizing that you're not going to be the most productive every day, and productivity does not equal happiness. So if you aren't productive today, that doesn't mean that today's a terrible day. No, it just means that today you can take it a little easier. You can take it easier on yourself, and then tomorrow you can come back even stronger and be even more ready to take on the day and really get everything done that you need to get done.
Yeah, fantastic. That's a wonderful, well explained answer on how you deal with a mental health issue, and that a lot of people can actually benefit from, because, as you said, during this quarantine episode in art history, a lot of people are seeing, okay, I got to work from home, I have
Yep.
family at home, but I got to be productive, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
So the days kind of go Monday through Monday. There's really no in between. It's just that there's no
Yep.
downtime whatsoever. And because you're at your own home, you have your laptop there, you're always going to turn it on. But essentially disconnect, take a couple minutes or a half an hour or so for yourself,
Yep.
every on and off, and make sure that you have those pauses and that routine set for yourself and for your family to balance it out. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Karina, for that. This last question, I really enjoy asking this last question of every single guest. I want you to go back, imagine that you can go back in time to that 14, 15-year-old girl going into freshman year of high school. This is right before you discovered 3D printing. If you could spend about 2 to 3 minutes to share about 3 pieces of advice with Karina Popovich, little Karina Popovich at that age, what would you share with her?
Man, that's a loaded question. I think for me, one of the biggest things that I would definitely have to say is realize that, for me back then, I was very naive. I was so ambitious that I was ridiculously naive. I was the type of person that thought, I have this great idea. Let me just, email old Mark Zuckerberg and tell him all about how great my idea was. And then, 2 days and I'll be a billionaire. Like, I'm telling you, this is how ambitious and naive I was, which, is great now that I think about it, because this ambition is what got me to where I am now. But at the same time, it's also hurt me so much in the process, because I was so naive, and I didn't realize that that's not how the system worked, and that's not, how things worked. And the biggest piece of advice I would tell myself is just to really not give up, and not to fall down in the face of challenges and rejection, but just to keep going and to keep pushing through and really just keep going at it. Because, I heard so many no's, but it was always the very few yeses that I heard that kept me going. And I think those yeses were the ones that really kind of reinvigorated me to keep going further. And if not for those yeses, I definitely wouldn't have kept going to the point where I'm at now. So it's definitely been a really long educational journey filled with lots of failure that has taught me a lot. I definitely say that is one of my biggest pieces of advice to myself. The second biggest piece of advice I would say is don't really waste your time so much on people that don't value it. Don't really focus too much time and energy on, having that big friend group that everyone wants to have in high school. That's not that important, and it, never will be. What you want to focus on is having those few friends that you can really trust and who will really be there for you and, tell you the truth, whether it hurts or not. and are there for you and can really support you in the time that you need them. I think that's something that I would have really needed to hear and really would have loved to learn, but wasn't really able to grasp for myself at the moment.
Fantastic. Thank you. Those are two great pieces of advice. Thank you so much, Karina Popovich. I acknowledge you for all the work that you're doing, for the persistence that you have, for the preparation that you have put into for achieving what you have, and for sharing it with us and with the audience to showcase that, this success is not an overnight happening. It is a process, and the back story behind it is really has a lot of no's, and
Yeah.
you have continued to push forth. And those yeses that happen along the way have made it worth it. And also to have that circle of individuals that actually believe in you to continue pushing forth. That is amazing. Those are amazing pieces of advice. Thank you so much. This has been a wonderful interview. I really have enjoyed the conversation that we've had. To the audience, thank you so much for listening to another wonderful episode of Success Innovation. I will put the link for Karina Popovich via LinkedIn so you can connect with her and reach out to her and have any comments that you wish with her. Thank you so much, Karina, for agreeing to do this show with Success Innovation and myself, Lázaro Herrera. Have a good evening. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Yay.
Thank you for sticking around and listening to another wonderful episode of Success Innovation. This time with Karina Popovich, who tells us about her early beginnings with STEM, how she started 3D printing, and how 3D printing turned into Wear Alpha, and how during the pandemic she turned to actually making face masks for other individuals, and how her venture at Cornell has taken her further. Thank you for listening, share, and like. This has been Lázaro Herrera for Success Innovation. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.